Hi, welcome to this session on environmental justice at the London Climate Change Festival. My name is Georgia Elliott-Smith, and I'm a UNESCO Special Envoy for Youth and the Environment and an activist with both Extinction Rebellion and the Stop the Edmonton Incinerator campaign. I'm talking to Rosamund Adoo Kissi-Debrah. Following the death of her 9-year-old daughter, Ella, in 2013 from a rare and severe form of asthma, Rosamund established the Ella Roberta Family Foundation to improve the lives of children suffering with asthma in southeast London. She campaigns around the world for improved awareness of the link between asthma and air pollution and is a World Health Organization advocate for clean air. She recently won the right to a second inquest to determine whether Ella's death was avoidable and whether illegal air pollution levels in London were a significant contributing factor. If you'd like to find out more about our campaigns, then please follow us on Twitter or visit our websites at ellaroberta.org and stop-edmonton-incinerator.org. Thank you. Hi, Ros, how are you?
Hi, I'm okay. How are you? Strange times indeed.
Oh, isn't it? It's just so strange. How are you managing?
I'm okay. Physically, we are well, and everyone appreciates that. I think mentally, it's quite hard for everyone, really. One of the few benefits, if there are any at all, has got to be the cleaner air. We are still not there yet. I hope now people have an appreciation of cleaner air. Because for so long we have got used to smelling diesel, petrol, all sorts of things, wood burning, that maybe people didn't really know what clean air was. But so that's about probably the only benefit I can really see with what's happened.
Absolutely. There's a real noticeable difference. I'm showing on screen at the moment 2 pictures, one from Parliament Hill looking out over London in December last year, and one looking out over London from the same position in April, just 3 weeks after lockdown. And the difference is unbelievable. The picture from 2019, there's a very obvious brown smog covering the city. And then in the April picture, the sky is bright blue. There's just none of that smog. And amount of posts on social media, people are noticing it. You know, I got a message from somebody the other day saying that they live near the Heathrow flight path and there's no smell of aviation fuel all of a sudden. And they've really only noticed that the air is cleaner since the lockdown. So there has been a really dramatic change. Do you think it will last?
If we go back to everything we did before, the air quality very soon will go back. I do absolutely understand that the country needs to run, but then I also believe that every individual life is important. You need people to work, but what is the balance between that and clean air? There's been a few interesting articles about air pollution and COVID-19, and I know what's important to me. I don't know what's important to everybody. Do people want a better quality of life? I thought it was really interesting when we first got on the news about the people that were affected and were dying. They kept on saying people with underlying health conditions. And when I looked up the health conditions, they were all linked with air pollution. It has also struck me that more people have died in areas that the air pollution is heavier. You can't stop a whole economy just to get clean air. But I really don't want us to go back to where we were before, because 40,000 people every year die due to air pollution, not just for 1 year. We are grieving as a nation because already 26,000. So try and imagine every year 40,000 people dying. And I believe those people are invisible again. We don't see them. And therefore, that's why it hasn't been a public health emergency, which it is. And I want people's quality of lives to be better. Yeah. So we now learn for COVID-19 that people living near main roads and things like that, we now see how they've all been really impacted. And we now also learn that different groups of people, so the BAME people, again, have been disproportionately affected. And I think you and I might have said this before, when we might have had a chat about pollution before, about how certain groups are disproportionately affected. And apparently those same groups are disproportionately affected by COVID-19, worryingly.
Absolutely. And it was all over the press recently, this Harvard University study showing that even a small increase in particulate matter in the air makes people more susceptible to catching these sorts of illnesses. And so we are finding, as this crisis unfolds, that people who live in heavily polluted areas are people who are catching the virus more frequently and are dying of it more frequently. And so there's a really tragic link there, as you say, between communities who live in these heavily polluted areas and these tragic deaths from COVID-19, which links very, very closely to your campaign, doesn't it? What I'd really like to do is show a video which you showed me that I found incredibly moving. And then afterwards, I'd really like you to tell me all about it. Okay.
It was put together for last year Environmental Day, done by the Every Breath Matters team, which is Callum Grieve. I said to Callum, it would be good to actually have facts, because we live in a country that 1.1 million children have asthma, and some children have asthma very badly. And although we've heard my daughter's story, I knew that other children were also being affected. And my big thing, Georgia, is to raise awareness always about public health. So I had an opportunity to do that, and that's why that video was shot. And to explain to people also how air pollution affects us. It affects every organ in our body. And bizarrely, up until now, we used to call it the invisible killer. You couldn't even make it up, the similarities with COVID-19. So they're going to intensive care, which I had mentioned to you, that's been similar. Some of her symptoms have been similar, obviously not all. She never had the virus, but the mucus plugging and the lungs, they are incredibly similar. It has been quite surprising. And again, governments, they have had warnings about air pollution for a long while. The sadness in me feels if they took it more seriously and they had cleaned up the air, maybe the virus wouldn't have been as bad as it is. There have been countless opportunities. There will be countless opportunities after this to clean up the air, and they will be doing their usual dithering. I do wonder that if the general public got incredibly angry and said, you know what, we're not going to have this anymore.
Yeah, you've been campaigning for a very long time. I've been campaigning for some time. And we've spoken before about this disbelief, really, that normal people don't get cross about this stuff and don't want to campaign about it. Were you a campaigner before this happened to Ella?
No, I wasn't. I was a teacher in a secondary school. But the problem here lies, it is invisible. And you won't die suddenly. So we will never know from what stage my daughter became ill. And like I said, it took 28 months. And Georgia, what you need to put into perspective is people are now being told there's an invisible thing out there and it can kill you in 2 weeks. And you must admit, I'm sure you've been surprised by some of the behavior. Maybe part of human nature is people think things won't happen to them.
Yes,
Maybe.
I agree. And I think that, this is one of the biggest things about climate change and environmental degradation, is because it happens so slowly, and it happens over the course of years, that I think people feel so disconnected from it. And, we've all got stuff to do. We've got to, well, not so much these days, but get the kids from school, get the shopping in, we've got work, we've got families, we've got things that need doing. So to actually contemplate these huge issues, which we feel quite powerless about. I think if you talk to anybody about climate change or air pollution, they would agree that it's a terrible thing. But I think we have, as a society, there's a sense of learned helplessness around what we can actually do to make a difference, and a sort of them and us as well, about the sort of people who campaign for these things, and a lack of identity with a lot of people. So how have you experienced your life as a campaigner, and how do you feel about that, getting more people involved? How can we do it?
Do you know what? This is what, personally, I don't even call myself a campaigner, which is quite interesting. I call myself an advocate, because I work with so many different people. When you're trying to raise awareness, it's trying to get people on board, which is really important. And we have a sort of, if I want to say, environment movement or air pollution movement. And my thing has never been to convince people in that movement. My thing has always been to speak to the British public at large and to let them know this is what's going on. And COVID-19 explains to me the difficulties. That's what it does. When people can't see something, it is very, very, very difficult to say, this thing you can't see is what is making you ill. It is incredibly difficult, and it's a very hard task. But I believe that everybody cares about their health. Absolutely. I don't care who you are. And a lot of us are living with long-term illnesses now. And it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, it doesn't.
It doesn't. I think you care about the health of your children. I care about mine. You care about the health of your parents. Everyone does. So yes, we are living longer in some cases. I know, again, there seems to be a bit of a divide. Depending on where you live, you might live longer. But although people are living longer, what COVID has shown us is a lot of people are living with underlying health issues. I believe a lot of people's immune systems are already compromised. So now that this virus is on the loose, they are unable to fight it. But like you say, we live such busy lives. We live in an economy-driven world. I remember even the guilt of having children and going back to work. You are made to feel that, goodness me, if you stay at home for a moment longer, you are a bad parent. You need to go out there. You need to earn money. We're all forced to go. So everyone is running. We are running for our next pound, and that becomes the driving force. Someone might hear this interview and go, we've got mortgages to pay. Yes, because we all must own our own house. We're all terrible listening to people who suddenly overnight had no jobs, and they didn't know where I didn't realize we were all living that closely to our next wage. Oh my goodness me.
I really hope that this crisis has brought to the surface a lot of those discussions that people can have about when we are eventually released from lockdown, when we return to our lives outside. What could that look like? What do we want to be different? I'd like to just talk a little bit now, though, about what are the next steps for you, because you've already been on a really long journey with this campaign.
We succeeded last year in getting a new inquest. And I keep my fingers crossed, because as a family, yes, it would mean a lot to us personally to succeed. But again, I hope that if we succeed, again, it's about forcing governments to actually do something. That's what the whole thing has been about, really.
Tell us about the inquest.
When the first inquest happened, it was more focused on what happened on the actual night that she passed away. And for me as her mum, when you have an incredibly healthy child and your child becomes ill suddenly, you are always going to have questions, by the way, as in, goodness me, what happened? Why has my child suddenly become so ill and why are they not here? And I think the first inquest ended that said her triggers were airborne. And I'm sure lately we've all heard that word quite a lot, airborne. And that did get me thinking, what could it possibly be? No, I absolutely did not know it was air pollution. And these things take a long time to come out. And it's through experts, a brilliant legal team. We realised that a lot of her attacks that were unexplained seem to be linked to when the air pollution was high. And it's not just her now. Like I said, these things take time to come up. We now know when there's spikes in air pollution, there's more asthma attacks and there's more heart attacks. So it is not just her. All that research, that's all new. So that research which I quoted you about asthma attacks and heart attacks, when she was alive, that research wasn't there. So in time, more has come out. I think I was naive in a way to think that if people knew the damage it was doing, there would be this rush to do something about it. You know, she suffered greatly, and it would be a great thing if in her memory, I know she's only one, but 7 million people die each year. So it's not just her. So in all those people's memories, if they clean up the air so that we can all have a better life, that's my ultimate goal. I don't have any hidden agenda, really. I think after what we went through, I thought, goodness, when I gathered myself together, I just didn't want any other parent. And parents of children who have asthma can tell you how frightening that can be. And my thing was, why would I want anyone else to go through what we went through? But people need to remember 1.1 million, and I say it again, children in this country have asthma. Thank goodness not all of them severe. Severe asthma will be 10% of them, but that's still quite a number.
Absolutely.
And childhood should be about play and fun, not rushing children to hospital and things like that. And I'm always going to believe that nothing that has happened in the last couple of months has changed my mind. It has made me even more focused that there are those who need to focus on the economy, because we need to live, we need to eat, we need wages. I am not naive, but there needs to be some of us who are also focused and battling for people's health. And hopefully we can meet some way in the middle. You can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have your health, it doesn't mean a lot. Do you see what I mean? And so I hope that's what Ella will contribute to, although she's no longer here, is trying to get clean air for you and I and our children and nations across the world. 7 million people dying each year is quite a lot. I am very, very sad for every single life that has been lost. I must really say that. My children and I watching it has been quite horrendous for us. In a way, it's kind of like reliving what we've been through. And my deepest condolences, Georgia. I mean that from the bottom of my heart, to all those families out there who has lost loved ones. I need to have hope. I have my down days, but I never give up hope. Hope that one day we will breathe clean air, and I think it will make all our lives better for it. I know people will say, oh, it's going to take a lot, Ros. Of course it's going to take a lot, but it is definitely worth it.
And I think the people who want it are many. So if we can galvanise them into action and into supporting campaigns like yours, then that would be really amazing. You know, I really hope that I can be part of this solution as well. This campaign, which I know I've spoken to you about, in Edmonton, in North London, which is just a couple of miles from my home, there is a waste incinerator, and 100% of the waste from our black bins goes into that incinerator without any kind of pre-sorting, which is crazy because it contributes to a linear economy. All of that plastic and paper and wood and compostable food material is just going straight into the incinerator and being burned. The results of that is particulates, it's heavy metals, it's solvents, it's all kinds of nasty gases like nitrogen dioxide going into the air, which are known triggers for asthma. Not only that, but this is £1.2 billion of public money is being spent on this. So, you know, I'm involved in this campaign now to try and get the government, the Secretary of State, to stop the project and to review it in light of what we now know, you know, the sorts of things that you're talking about our new understanding of how air pollution massively impacts on people's health, and really exacerbates underlying health conditions that are already in the population, puts pressure on the NHS, puts pressure on families, and creates these awful cases of poor health.
Yeah, what I have never understood is almost certain the people that voted these bizarre projects through are politicians, and we vote for politicians.
Yeah.
I am sure if you and I were talking to them, they will go on about how much money it is saving. Everything seems to be short term.
Yeah.
Short term and money. I still don't understand why health is so low down on people's agenda. I'm almost certain that some politician somewhere voted that through.
There's loads of politicians, you know, Ros, that the board of the North London Waste Authority, who are the ones who are putting this project through, pushing it through, the board is made up of 14 Labour councillors. You know, the very people who are supposed to be looking after us. And my local MP is a former board member. And when I have tried to engage with my MP, they have just shut it down, saying, you know, well, it's going ahead and I'm sure that it's fine. You know, and that gives me very little faith in politicians.
One of the things, they are not held accountable for them. And what I mean by that, let me make it very clear. I mean that when children or whoever gets ill, it never finds its way back to the people who started those projects in the first place.
Yeah.
There is a lack of accountability. People who make these dreadful decisions, if they're held accountable, then I think they may think twice about doing it. But if you're voting something through and you know it's never going to come back to you, and also if you don't live in the area, it's always fascinating to find out who actually, these people making these decisions, are they directly affected by it? And you find out a lot of the time they are not, which is also quite interesting. But these irresponsible decisions need to stop. And it's not jumping on the bandwagon or it is moaning. No, they generally affect people's lives, and especially young people, because no doubt you're going to tell me there are schools in the area.
Oh, there are dozens of schools that are affected. You know, and the pollution from this 100-metre high chimney is being blown all over London. You know, there's an incredible website called Plume Plotter, which has real-time graphics showing the pollutants. And it is just shocking, you know, that this is going on, and also that people don't know about it. You know, there is not sufficient communication, and there's a huge amount of greenwash going on, where the messaging around it is that this is an environmentally friendly solution. And of course, you know, I understand that politicians are not specialists in this area, and the people that they're communicating with are not environmental scientists, you know, and some of this stuff is incredibly technical, and so people do tend to believe the messaging around it. And one of the things that I'm really fighting against is the greenwashing about this particular facility, which has come out saying that, you know, the authority even has a Mythbusters section of their website, which says, you know, that this is a low carbon project, and that it is great for the circular economy, and it meets all kinds of tick boxes environmentally. It's just complete lies, and I really, that gets me so cross, because I think normal people, as we've talked about, are so busy and are so bombarded with misinformation that they don't know where to turn. And a lot of people do want to do the right thing, but I think getting involved in some of these campaigns can sometimes just get so confusing, you know, trying to understand the science of it, and it is very technical. And so my desire is to just say to people, when people are campaigning against things like this, who do you believe? Do you believe the authority who is invested financially in it, or do you believe the scientists, the residents, the campaigners coming out saying, come on, we need to ask some questions about this, and spend a moment considering that those that have vested interests in the project going ahead might not necessarily be the best people to get your facts from.
One of the things I pray people take from what we're going through now is opening their eyes, seeing what's happening. We've got a London election coming up next year, and I want people to vote more than red, blue, yellow. I don't want it just to be about what party they support. I want people to vote more about what an individual is going to do for their neighbourhood where they live. See, I give the British public, lots of credit. They know what type of questions to ask when people come banging on their doorstep, wanting their vote. And what I want them to do is actually question them. So maybe it is you and I, our job to raise these issues that are going on. And people, part of it, there are some areas that have always been blue, red, or and they just vote just based on that, really. Yeah. I would really love people to give these politicians a kind of wake-up call, because I think some of them have got rather complacent. They know they're going to get back in. If we continue to vote them in, it becomes very difficult to complain about it. Someone wants your vote. You say to them, what are you going to do? This is going on locally.
Work for it.
Where do you stand on this? How can you put something like an incinerator near schools and for children to be breathing particulate matter? It doesn't even make sense. It doesn't even make sense.
It makes no sense on so many levels. I could talk for hours on this topic about why it's wrong. And one of the items of greenwashing that is coming out really clearly is this idea, the authority is saying, well, if we don't incinerate it, then we'll have to landfill it, which is a complete nonsense. 80% of what goes into the incinerator is recyclable, and therefore we could take that 80% material out. We could be investing that 1.2 billion pounds of public money in a solution that actually is better for everybody and is investing in the future instead of in old technology that's really dirty and is getting us nowhere. Is just adding to the problem. The incinerator doesn't even solve the problem of landfill, because it only reduces the amount of waste by 75%. So you still end up with 25% of that material concentrated down into this massively toxic ash, which then has to go to the north of England, where it's encapsulated in salt mines, old salt mines underground. So we're essentially taking all of that rubbish that was recyclable and could have been turned into nice new material, pouring it out into the sky, and they call this skyfilling. So as opposed to landfilling, we're just putting all of that rubbish into the sky, and then being left with this awful toxic material at the end that we're then dumping on somebody else's doorstep and leaving them with this really terrible pollution for the future. It's just wrong on so many levels, and I think the more that people know about it, I hope the more they will think that that's not right. There's got to be something that we can do to stop this. And this is a project that's happening right now. They have planning permission, but the planning permission was awarded several years ago, before the climate emergency, before the UK's net zero carbon target, before the Mayor of London's targets on recycling became stricter. And so I think there's a real case now, if we can get enough people to make enough noise about this, then hopefully we can get the Secretary of State, or even our local politicians, to pressure the Secretary of State to call this project into a pause and review against new science, and try and get that public money spent in a way that is not pouring more pollution into the atmosphere in London, which is the absolute last thing that we need.
Yeah, I think you're right. Do continue. And always, as hard as it is, just remember, and the message to get out there is that people's lives matter. and you're not some sort of lunatic greenie kind of thing, and you care about
well, I might be a bit.
it is getting that across to people, that different people have to take different roles. That's what you and I have chosen to do. People would like to know, and a lot of things, Georgia, they don't know. I didn't know about it until you've brought it to my attention. So the role you're playing is really important, and it's bringing it to people's attention and showing them that it is affecting them, it is affecting their children, and they can do something about it. By the way, politicians don't like to be unpopular. People should always remember that. I always have that in the back. They don't
That's
like
true.
to be unpopular. If they think they can't get in if they think people are going to vote against them, they soon do the right thing. Isn't that strange? So we don't need to scare people. We just need to give people facts. We need to stick to evidence-based and show people. We don't need to lie. We need to get the evidence and say to people, this is how this is affecting you and your family. And I would like you to join me or support in what I am doing. We deserve it. We demand it. We want to breathe clean air. And we would like governments to respond accordingly. And you know what? We are not going to stop demanding it. It is our right, you know. It is our human right to breathe clean air, the same way it is to drink clean water. And we need to ask for that. You know, we're quite reserved as a nation, but I do think we need to start demanding things now.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that politicians have a lot of background noise. There's always something that they need to be focusing on, and they're always being criticised in all sorts of ways. So we really need, as a society, to direct their attention towards the things that matter to us. So tell us then, how can people support your campaign? How can they get in touch with you? What's the next steps for you?
Well, I'm on social media. I'm on Twitter, Rosamund_. Els Foundation. We've got a Just Giving page. Funding is always an issue for campaigning, so all donations are always welcome. I need as much support and help as possible. And I will let people know when the inquest hopefully will still go ahead. It was meant to be the 30th of November, but so much has changed. The public support, I can't tell you, it's absolutely overwhelming, and I'm incredibly grateful. So anyone who wants to join my campaign, the Ella Roberta Family Foundation, we have a website. And any ideas, I'm willing to join up with other campaigners, because as an individual, you can't. It takes a group, you know, it takes a whole village to bring up a child. And this is what I believe here as well. But it is a long thing. I'm not expecting things to happen overnight, by the way. It is
when you have a campaign, things don't happen overnight, do they?
No.
I think people tend to only see it when it hits the news, but the long road to get there can be incredibly difficult. We need community to kind of prop us up and support us, and to pull together with lots of different skills. It's funny, as an Extinction Rebellion campaigner as well, people think, well, I don't want to get involved because I don't want to be out on the street making a nuisance of myself or shouting with all of those crusties, you know. But what they don't realise is behind the scenes of every campaign, there's all kinds of stuff and ways that you can help, doing web pages and helping with campaigning online, or even logistics, you know, and helping get things around and building groups and communities and holding meetings. There's always things you can do to support any campaign that isn't necessarily taking you out of your comfort zone.
I never thought I would be having this type of conversation with you. Shows you how quickly things can change. Never thought so. Never.
I know. Well, before we go, I'm just going to let people know, if they want to follow the progress of the Edmonton incinerator campaign or get involved at all, then the website is at stop-edmonton-incinerator.org. There's also Stop the Rebuild on Twitter, and there's also email links. So please do get in touch, especially if you live in one of the 7 London boroughs that sends their waste to the incinerator. I think you would be particularly invested in it. So those boroughs are Camden, Islington, Hackney, Haringey, Enfield, Barnet and Waltham Forest. We need all the bodies we can get to try and...
No, I think that's really important to say. And everyone together, it's amazing what people can achieve if we all put our minds together. So I wish you all the luck.
You too, and I'll be watching the
Take
progress of
care.
your case.
Okay,
Bye then.
bye.
Bye bye.